This is season 3 of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. The story progresses after Rimuru defeated Clayman and was acknowledged as a demon lord. He mentions that after the meeting concluded, Leon and Valentine left, and they were treated to a meal by Guy. Rimuru then tastes one of the dishes, finding it exquisite. He asks Raphael to analyze the recipe. Observing Milim eating without manners, Rimuru feels reassured that he doesn't need to worry about them. He notices Milim attempting to drink liquor and tries to stop her. However, Milim explains that this is her reward for pretending to be controlled. Dagrul remarks that Milim could have ended the act sooner, as Clayman never mentioned the mastermind. Milim responds that she couldn't miss the rare opportunity to fight Rimuru. Rimuru comments that it's too early for her to drink, but Milim persists in trying to take the alcohol from him. Kai wonders if the brandy was made with grapes from Eurasania, and Rimuru confirms it. He thinks they can produce more now that they have a stable fruit supply, and Dagrul notes that Valentine is missing out on a good drink. Rimuru realizes he has many questions for her. Raphael finishes analyzing the recipes, and Volpurgis comes to an end. Rimuru returns to Tempest, where everyone welcomes him with bows. Diablo congratulates him on joining Octagram. Rimuru wonders why he's there, and Rigard suggests they continue talks later as Rimuru must be tired. The scene shifts to Rimuru enjoying tea with Diablo, Shen, and Veldora. A goblin brings pudding for them. Diablo gives his share to Veldora, mentioning it's the first of their promises. Rimuru wonders why Diablo isn't eating his ship, and Diablo explains that he promised it to Veldora in exchange for information. Rimuru realizes that Diablo knows about what happened in Volpurgis because Veldora informed him and wonders what Diablo traded the information for. He finds out it was for 3 puddings and notes that Veldora doesn't need to eat to sustain himself. Veldora agrees that he doesn't need to eat but still enjoys it. He mentions that Rimuru also doesn't have a need to eat. Diablo asks Shin if she fulfilled her role as Rimuru's bodyguard, and Shin confirms she did. She wonders about Diablo's mission, and Diablo mentions it's going well. Rimuru is surprised at Diablo's timely return, and Diablo explains he was attending to some business when Veldora asked him to come back. Veldora attempts to leave, but Rimuru stops him, reminding him not to interfere with others' work. Rimuru takes away Veldora's pudding and instructs the goblin named Haruna not to give Veldora snacks in the future. He then asks Diablo if it's okay for him to stay and inquires about Falmouth's situation. Diablo explains he has insiders managing things in Falmouth and has restored all the prisoners of war to their original condition. Rimuru realizes Diablo is referring to the prisoners tortured by Shin and mentions leaving them as they were was inconvenient. The story then shifts back to when Diablo was heading to Falmouth. He tries to heal the 3 prisoners, but healing magic has no effect on them. Diablo wonders what Shin did to them and proceeds to heal one of them using magic, hearing their screams. Iham and the others hope the prisoners will be okay by the time they reach Falmouth. Diablo restores Father Rahim to his original state, and the father thanks him. He then tries to heal Raisin, but Raisin asks him to attend to his king first. Diablo warns that favors will come at a cost, but heals Raisin nonetheless. Raisin hopes Diablo will allow him to serve as his lowest servant, offering his body and soul for Diablo's use and asking for mercy for King Admaris. Diablo agrees to the terms but emphasizes that he won't tolerate any disrespect towards his lord, Rimuru. He warns that even a hint of disrespect towards Rimuru could lead to dire consequence, possibly endangering the very existence of Falmouth. Raisin and Rahim agree to Diablo's conditions, pledging their loyalty to him. Raisin reflects on his torture and expresses disbelief at the betrayal of the royal sorcerer who served Falmouth for generations. He acknowledges Raisin's decision and promises Diablo his full support as Falmouth's final king. Diablo instructs them to follow his orders, assuring them that they won't suffer under his command. He relies on his unique skill, Tempter, to prevent any betrayal. Yom asks about the hostages, and Diablo assures him they are fine, adding that they will soon arrive in Falmouth. He resolves to swiftly execute the national takeover upon their arrival. As they enter Falmouth, the scene shifts to the minister and court, who are shocked by the disfigured king. They express frustration at their inability to restore the king's normal appearance. They inquire about the situation, and Raisin clarifies that he is not Shogo. He introduces himself and explains that he worked with the champions and returned with the king. The ministers are uncertain if this means that Falmouth's forces were defeated, and they have numerous questions. One of them calls for everyone to calm down and listen to what Raisin has to say first. Raisin explains that their battle awakened the slumbering dragon in the Jura forest, causing everyone to vanish at the time of its rebirth. The ministers are puzzled as the Western Holy Church had declared the dragon dead. Raisin clarifies that while the dragon was indeed slain, true dragons cannot be permanently killed, they are reborn elsewhere. It was unexpected that the dragon's rebirth occurred so nearby, and swiftly. The knights and soldiers fighting on the land disappeared after Veldora's resurrection, leaving only them behind. The ministers find this difficult to believe as it, and the champions enter the throne room. One of the ministers questions why commoners like them are entering the throne room. Raisin asks Minister Carlos to calm down, explaining that this group saved them. The ministers struggle to comprehend the situation. Rieheim elaborates that it was a fierce battle where both sides clashed, with their outnumbering the monster. But the monsters had the geographical advantage, resulting in significant casualties. The chaos of the battle led to Veldora's resurrection, and facing the dragon, all they could do was offer their final prayers. Raisin explains that Rimuru, the master of monsters, stood up against the dragon and persuaded it to calm down. The ministers find this difficult to believe, but Raisin points out that Rimuru had the support of the dragons and collaborated with them to negotiate with Veldora. The ministers are astounded that Rimuru also has the dryads on his side, realizing that provoking him was a serious mistake if he possesses the ability to negotiate with the dragon. Yom assures them that they needn't worry because he aided Rimuru in defeating the Orc Lord, and Rimuru is actually a benevolent individual who wishes to coexist peacefully with humans. Carlos suggests that Yom should act as their representative and convey their demands to Rimuru, deciding to inform him of their demands at a later time. Yom argues that this won't work because Rimuru, despite being open-hearted, is currently furious due to their declaration of war against his nation and the loss of his comrades. Carlos angrily questions if Yom is on Rimuru's side, and Diablo, angered by his disrespect toward his master, intervenes. This startles Raisin, who urges Carlos to remain calm, but Carlos disregards his advice and asserts that a commoner like Yom has no right to speak on matters concerning the kingdom. Diablo becomes even more furious, and Raisin uses a spell to immobilize Carlos, instructing him not to speak until he comprehends the situation. He then confirms to the ministers that Yom is speaking the truth, stating that they have lost the war. King Admaris was affected by the storm dragon's magic, and they witness his condition firsthand. Having been held captive and released thanks to Yom's word as a champion, the ministers contemplate yielding to a nation of monsters, recognizing their disadvantage with the storm dragon on their side. One of them suggests accepting the offer. Diablo approves of this decision, promising to release their king as agreed. The soldiers become wary of him standing so close to the king and question his identity. Diablo introduces himself as Rimuru's butler and uses a potion to heal King Admaris. He then delivers a message from Rimuru, outlining the terms of peace talks scheduled for a week later. Rimuru offers 3 options. The king abdicates and pays reparations, they become a vassal state, or they continue the war. The ministers express concern about the short time frame for a decision, but Diablo dismisses their objections, emphasizing that Rimuru's concerns outweigh theirs. Diablo warns them not to resort to any tricks and gives them a week to respond, stating that failure to reply will be interpreted as a desire to continue the war. With that, he exits the throne room. The story returns to the present, with Diablo explaining how he applied pressure on everyone, leaving Rimuru astonished that Diablo revealed such a strategy. Diablo explains that instilling fear was the most effective approach, and Rimuru is curious about the terms proposed for the peace treaty. Diablo reveals that he requested 10,000 stellas in reparations, equivalent to 1 trillion yen. Rimuru finds this demand excessive, but Diablo assures him not to be concerned. He clarifies that Falmouth has only one viable option: abdication and payment of reparations, possibly with negotiations to reduce the amount. Diablo indicates that they will likely comply with lowering the price and shift the burden of payment onto a third party. Rimuru wonders about their next steps, and Diablo reassures him, saying he has everything planned. He assures that they'll be able to reclaim at least 1,000 stellas. Rimuru inquires about the plan afterward, and Diablo explains that once they choose the abdication option, King Admaris will take the fall for the crisis. Rimuru realizes that he's the third party Diablo mentioned earlier. Diablo predicts that without the royal guard, the king won't be able to oppose the nobles and will have to fulfill their demands, albeit superficially. Rimuru understands that without military support, the king's faction will lose to the nobles' faction, suggesting that absorbing Ihim's faction is the best strategy to maintain cooperation. In this scenario, Admaris would ally with Ihim and others. Rimuru suggests lending some forces to Yom, and Diablo anticipates that Raisin will contact him soon. Rimuru questions if this strategy will ensure victory, and Diablo assures him that the next king won't be able to form alliances with neighboring nations. He explains that Fuse and Gazelle are already leveraging their influence to pressure Falmouth's neighbors, but he's prepared to handle any opposition personally. Diablo urges Rimuru not to worry and agrees to leave everything to him. We then see that the demon lord Kazarin, Yuki, and the clowns are sad upon learning about Clayman's death. Kazarim confirms the news, stating that she can no longer sense him. Tyr becomes emotional upon hearing this, while Yuki blames himself for underestimating the demon lords. Laplace acknowledges his own responsibility in the matter, admitting that he proposed the idea without foreseeing such consequences. Tyr expresses relief that Laplace returned unharmed, considering Demon Lord Valentine's strength comparable to their president's. She wonders about the circumstances of Valentine's defeat. Laplace attributes his victory to strategic timing, noting that they fought during the new moon, weakening the vampires. He modestly credits luck and contrasts himself with Clayman, whom he considers foolish. Footman reprimands Laplace for disrespecting Clayman, but Laplace continues to jest, prompting Footman to punch him. A confrontation ensues, halted by Kazarim's intervention. Yuki urges Laplace to drop the antagonistic act, while Footman comprehends Laplace's intentions and de-escalates the situation. The group convenes for a meeting, during which Yuki highlights the losses incurred, including the base, forces, treasure, and jewels given to Clayman. Tyr expresses confusion, believing the base should remain secure. Kazarim reveals that the base granted to Clayman was swiftly overtaken overnight by a small group of Majin sent by the slimes. They deduce that the slime used a diversion on the battlefield to seize the main base. Yuki emphasizes the need to reassess their strategy, advocating patience for their world-conquering aspirations. Kazarim agrees, cautioning against impulsive actions exacerbating their situation. Footman concurs with their assessment, but Yuki expresses frustration at being passive targets. He suggests retaliating against the slime for Clayman's demise, albeit in a limited capacity. Laplace recognizes Yuki's inclination for scheming, as Yuki proposes needling the slime. The scene shifts to the Holy Empire of Loblius, where Hinata describes a society founded on absolute equality under the demon lord Luminous Valentine, their god. Reflecting on her past encounter, Hinata acknowledges her defeat only to Luminous Valentine, contrasting it with her perceptions of Shizu's approach as too lenient. She resolves to rely solely on her own strength, finding a place where she can grow stronger. Hinata reveals that the Western Holy Church became her sanctuary, where she swiftly rose to become a paladin in her first year and eventually ascended to lead the Crusaders in her second year. With each step up the hierarchy, she uncovered deeper truths. She learned that the revered Holy Emperor Loblius was actually Louis, a vampire, and the twin brother of Demon Lord Roy Valentine. Armed with this knowledge, she confronted the brothers in a bid to liberate humanity from vampire dominion. Despite emerging victorious, she sustained severe injuries in the fierce battle. Contemplating her sacrifice, Hinata was visited by Luminous Valentine, who miraculously healed the vampires and spared Hinata's life. Luminous posed a profound question about justice, highlighting its inherent complexity and the limits of imposing one's will on others. Hinata was given a week to pass a rigorous trial, after which she would face Luminous Valentine in a decisive confrontation. Following Hinata's successful completion of the trial, she confronted Luminous and emerged victorious, pledging her allegiance to her. Hinata then reveals that Luminous and her kin do not sustain themselves by tearing people apart for their flesh. Rather, they require only a small amount of blood for sustenance. Higher-ranking vampires can even endure without blood indefinitely. Hinata explains that the quality of human blood improves with the happiness of the human race, and Luminous strictly prohibits excessive blood extraction. The nation maintains a high level of order and equality, even among Western nations, and to preserve this utopia, Hinata commits to protecting Luminous. Later, Hinata encounters Louis, who informs her of Roy's demise. Despite her disbelief, Louis insists on the truth, recounting how an intruder killed Roy upon his unexpected return from Valpurg. Hinata ponders whether Roy might have been an imposter demon lord, as he was as formidable as any genuine one. She struggles to reconcile the strength of the mysterious clown she encountered with that of a demon lord. Hinata reassures Louis, saying that everything should be fine as long as Lady Luminous remains unharmed. However, Louis disagrees, pointing out that Roy's demise, previously seen as a menace, might lead to a decline in people's faith and their belief. He also mentions that Veldora has been resurrected, but the stability of the Jura forest remains intact for now. Hinata attributes the forest's stability to her decision to let Rimuru escape, but Louis adds that the forces of the Falmouth Kingdom have also been wiped out. Reflecting on her actions, Hinata regrets not eliminating Rimuru when she had the chance, despite trapping him in her holy field. Louis questions if her leniency was due to Rimuru's claim of being from her world, but Hinata denies this, stating that Rimuru's objectives are at odds with Lady Luminous's goals. Hinata explains that she disregarded Rimuru's words and attempted to destroy his town to prevent any further interference. Louis suggests that Hinata's failure may have unintended benefits, as it could prompt Western nations to unite against the growing threat in the Jura forest. With Roy's demise, the monsters become a convenient common enemy for humanity to rally against in the upcoming Tema War. Hinata expresses doubts about whether things will go smoothly, suggesting that it would be ideal if the Jura forest remained stable and if monsters and humans could coexist peacefully. She brings up the Eastern merchant who provided her with information, mentioning their planned meeting from the previous night. However, she realized the merchant's ulterior motives, leading her to reconsider sparing Rimuru. Louis proposes using Tempest as a defense against the East until they are prepared, assuming Rimuru survived the Valpurgis Council. He anticipates Lady Luminous's return, noting that informing her of Roy's death will be distressing. Despite being siblings, he remarks on his lack of emotional attachment to Roy's passing, contrasting it with Lady Luminous's expected grief. Upon Lady Luminous's return, she dismisses Roy's actions as foolishness. Louis inquires about the events at Valpurgis, prompting her to reveal what occurred. Luminous provides them with all the details, expressing frustration that Veldora always obstructs her plan. She believes she could have revived Roy had he been nearby, prompting Hinata to apologize for her failure to capture the intruder. However, Luminous assures her that she merely followed orders and takes full responsibility for the situation. Louis attributes the blame to his brother's inability to meet Luminous's expectations, but she insists now is not the time for remorse. With the evil dragon's revival and the emergence of the demon lord Rimuru, they must strategize to confront both threats. Hinata offers to defeat Veldora on Luminous's behalf, but Luminous warns her of Veldora's immense power. She explains that Veldora is a natural force beyond conventional weapons or magic, capable of causing devastating shockwaves with his mere presence. Louis recalls how Night Rose Castle was reduced to rubble in the wake of Veldora's power. Hinata resolves to confront the dragon when necessary, but Luminous urges her to exercise restraint to avoid losing her. Hinata acknowledges this, reflecting on the mistake of labeling Rimuru as a monster and ignoring his words. She considers whether this was manipulated by the Eastern merchant, and ponders if they have their own informant. Seeking guidance, Hinata asks Luminous what to do about Rimuru. Luminous advises leaving him alone for the time being. However, Hinata expresses concern that the monster's expansion into cities and highways might attract the attention of the angels, potentially accelerating their invasion. Luminous warns against making enemies of Rimuru and Veldora, as it could make them the primary targets of the angels. Hinata suggests that their town's existence challenges the belief that monsters are humanity's common enemy in Luminism. Louis proposes enlisting Rimuru as an ally, perhaps as a sinister figure to serve their interests, as an evil demon lord. Luminous asserts that Rimuru's intentions of building a peaceful nation and protecting humans make it unlikely for him to become their enemy. She acknowledges that Louis's idea could have been viable if Rimuru hadn't already established contact with humans. However, their current course of action is to wait and observe. She suggests informing their followers of Veldora's return and capitalizing on Rimuru's openness to political exchange to manipulate the Western nation. Luminous seeks Hinata's approval for this plan, although Hinata expresses concern about Rimuru holding a grudge for her previous attempt on his life. Luminous reassures her, believing that Rimuru is rational enough not to antagonize them. The scene shifts to Falmouth, where Admaris proposes paying war reparations to Tempest amounting to 10,000 stellas. The nobles object to this, citing the immense financial burden it would impose. They discuss alternative strategy, including seeking support from the Western Church and the Lightspeed hero of Ingratia, Masayuki. Despite their reservations, they refuse to comply with the monster's demands. Admaris's brother encourages him not to give up easily, but Admaris insists that they are powerless against the Storm Dragon. He resigns himself to paying reparations and relinquishing the throne. A noble interrupts, revealing crucial documents from Blumund stating their allegiance with Tempest and criticizing Falmouth's failed campaign. While some dismiss Blumund's influence due to its size, they worry about Dworgen, a formidable armed nation, aligning with Tempest. Suddenly, a soldier arrives with news that Rimuru has declared himself a demon lord. The nobles speculate on the reactions of other demon lords, hoping they might eliminate Veldora along with Rimuru. Another soldier reports Rimuru's victory over demon lord Clayman, and the affiliations of Carrion and Frey with demon lord Milan. The 8 current demon lords have formed a group called the Octagram. The king then informs the nobles that both Veldora and Rimuru pose threats. He emphasizes their inability to contend with these monsters and announces his decision to abdicate in favor of his brother Edward, rather than nominating his son Edgar as the king. Admaris explains that Edgar is still too young to navigate the challenges ahead. The nobles agree, and Edgar silently welcomes the prospect of becoming the next king. Subsequently, Falmouth signs an armistice with the Jura Tempest Federation, ostensibly recognizing Tempest as a nation, though this agreement is merely superficial. The The scene transitions to Shuna meeting Rimuru after returning from Clayman's castle, where Rimuru inquires about Hakuro's whereabouts. Shuna informs him that Hakuro remains at the castle, attending to some duties. Rimuru realizes that Shuna is having Hakuro handle her tasks. Benimaru then updates Rimuru that he's collaborating with Jelb to investigate Clayman's castle, distribute the spoils of war, and manage the prisoners. Concerned about his presence, Rimuru questions Benimaru if it's appropriate for him to be there since he's supposed to be the commander. Benimaru explains that with the war concluded, there's no need for Rimuru to remain. He mentions having delegated his command to his capable vice commander before departing, prompting Rimuru to reflect on both siblings' tendency to pass on responsibilities. As they gather to discuss further, Rimuru mentions hearing about Gabairu's return to the battlefield. Benimaru shares about his alliance with Father Mitter, one of Malum's followers, who is assisting in the aftermath of the battle. Rimuru acknowledges the immense effort war demands, especially in managing prisoners of war, expressing hope for their cooperation. Benimaru assures Rimuru that he has addressed the prisoners, easing Rimuru's concerns. Curious about the explanation given to the prisoners, Rimuru inquires about Gabiru's return. Benimaru reveals Gabiru will soon arrive with the 3 Biscuiteers, surprising Rimuru with their inclusion in the group. Benimaru reminds him that after Malum destroyed the capital of Urusane, they agreed to provide shelter to the displaced residents temporarily. Since they couldn't accommodate everyone, they opted to divide them. Those whose villages remained intact returned to their homes. Only those eager to acquire new skills will come to Tempest, while the lycanthropes and strong Magin will join Geld's team to revitalize Urusania's land. Reflecting on this, Rimuru recalls that Urusania is now under Malum's control, and during Valpurgis, he proposed relocating her capital there as they were rebuilding it from scratch. Malum approved the idea. Benimaru adds that some Magin prisoners will also accompany the lycanthropes, and he advises maintaining vigilance just in case. Hearing this, Rimuru feels pleased that his followers have become capable of making their own decisions, though he wonders if they no longer need him. A few days later, Diablo returns from Falmouth, presenting Rimuru with evidence of the peace treaty and 15 stellas as reparations. Rimuru acknowledges that the amount received exceeds their expectations, and Diablo informs him that most of it came from King Admaris's personal wealth. The royalists anticipated that, without the protection of the knights, the nobles would exploit them regardless, prompting Rimuru to speculate on the likelihood of an impending civil war. Diablo confirms the possibility, and reveals that the remaining portion of the funds is in the form of a loan, expressing skepticism about the king's commitment to the agreement. To preempt any potential betrayal, he orchestrated the king's brother's ascension to the throne instead of the prince. Raphael adds that the faction unwilling to pay the remaining reparations will likely shift the blame onto Admaris. Detailing further, Diablo explains that Admaris, after relinquishing the throne to become a viscount, will settle in a countryside village near Count Earl Niddle's domain, where him and others reside. In case of any trouble, they can seek assistance from Niddle's forces. Even if the new king attempts to isolate Admaris, Ihim would intervene, potentially sparking a civil conflict by exposing the new king's deceitfulness. Rimuru views this as an ideal strategy but cautions Diablo to remain vigilant. He emphasizes minimizing civilian harm and assures Diablo that additional funds from the Stellas are available if needed. Diablo assures him it won't be necessary, and requests permission to engage in combat, but Rimuru declines, opting instead to assign Diablo troops to work with and advise him to maintain a low profile, which Diablo agrees to. Recalling the Western Holy Church's attempt to contact Rahim and their interest in learning about the conflict with Falmouth, Rimuru deliberates on their response. He asserts the importance of not ignoring them, and Diablo suggests allowing Rahim to testify, a notion Rimuru agrees with, given the Church's desire for information, particularly with only 3 survivors from the battle. Rimuru notes the Church's monitoring of Veldora, making deceit unlikely, prompting Diablo to inquire about Rahim's testimony. Rimuru plans to encode a message into a crystal, and entrust Rahim with delivering it to observe the reaction of the Church. Datta arrives and informs Rimuru that the prisoners of war have arrived. Rimuru observes their entry into the city alongside the lycanthropes, and Albus and Sophia express gratitude for accepting them. Rimuru assures them it's no trouble and inquires about Phobio, learning that he's been tasked with overseeing the prisoners. Rimuru informs them that housing and employment arrangements have been made for the refugees and promises to provide further details later. With that settled, they depart. Gabiru returns, and Rimuru praises his performance in battle, though Gabiru feels he still has much to learn, having been bested by Father Mitter. Rimuru encourages him not to fret, emphasizing his potential for growth. Gobta hands Rimuru a letter from Malin, revealing her intention to visit along with some of her followers to learn cooking from Rimuru. Rimuru questions if Datta understands the significance, and Datta explains that according to Hermie, the dragon faithful abstain from cooked food, suggesting Malam's followers lack culinary expertise. Rimuru comprehends Malam's intentions, while Zien questions why Malam doesn't directly request her followers to cook for her. Rimuru explains that Malam has her own unique way of understanding social dynamics. He suggests they treat Malam's followers with the respect they deserve, a sentiment Gabiru agrees with. A month passes since Valpurgis, and the city is bustling with activity. Gelb arrives looking weary, prompting Rimuru to inquire about his condition privately. Gelb explains his efforts in organizing the prisoners, dividing them into groups, and surveying the land for clearing. However, he encountered challenges. High orcs easily communicate telepathically, but this method isn't effective with lycanthropes or magin. Additionally, some magins resist authority, hindering productivity. Rimuru reflects on the complexities of managing and educating diverse groups. The situation reminds Rimuru of his time as an office worker. He suggests to Gelb that they go out for a drink later to unwind. The scene shifts to a bar, where Gelb remarks on the challenge of ensuring everyone grows at the same pace. Trini suggests that it might seem faster if he handled everything himself, but doing so would deprive those under him of valuable experience. Gelb expresses concern that at his current rate, he won't be able to assist Rimuru effectively. Rimuru reassures him, drawing parallels to his past life as an office worker. They spend the night drinking together. The next day, Rimuru accompanies Rimuru around town with Shi. Rigard informs him that merchants have started returning, as Fuse has assured them of safety. Rimuru is pleased by the news. Rigard adds that there hasn't been significant movement from other nations since Rimuru's coronation as Demon Lord. He mentions that the Emperor of the Sorceress Dynasty of Elion, Elmesha Elru, has officially recognized their relationship with Tempest. Rimuru realizes that Elmesha is eager for the construction of the highway. Rigard notes that their allies worldwide are diligently fulfilling their duties. Rimuru ponders over who was overseeing the highway survey, leading to a scene where he convenes a meeting with the ogres. Soi reports that he hasn't encountered any hostile monsters along the projected route, and the local populace readily agreed to their plans. Rimuru instructs him to conclude the survey before Gelb becomes available again, but Soi raises a concern. He explains that the Kusha Mountains, bordering Tempest, are riddled with treacherous canyons and inhabited by the Tengu. Despite the locals' warnings, Soi emphasizes that the Tengu, though friendly, are a warrior race. Even Demon Lord Frey avoided direct confrontation with them. Soi suggests seeking Frey's counsel, and Rimuru agrees to approach the Tengu, though Benimaru volunteers to go instead. Rimuru consents, acknowledging that a Demon Lord's presence might unsettle them. Reflecting on the numerous challenges ahead, Rimuru resolves to convene a meeting with everyone soon. The scene transitions to Rimuru meeting Hikuro, who reports on Clayman's territory, the puppet nation of Dastave. Hikuro explains that the land is inhabited solely by dark elves responsible for maintaining the castle grounds, showing willingness to follow orders. They revealed that Dastave was once an elven kingdom, supported by the ruins still present in the area. These elves consider themselves as caretakers of the graves. Rimuru speculates that Clayman likely gained wealth from items found in these ruins. Hakuro adds that ancient ruins are scattered worldwide and often targeted by treasure hunters, but only a few have been discovered. Rimuru instructs Hakuro to keep this information under wraps until he can inspect the ruins personally. Later, Rimuru gathers everyone for a meeting to announce his ascension to Demon Lord, which is met with joy. He shares plans to expand his rule over the entire Jura forest, anticipating no issues. Benimaru inquires if Rimuru's jurisdiction extends to the lands across the river, to which Rimuru affirms. He questions if there are any objections. Benimaru clarifies that while there are no issues, the territory beyond the river falls outside the Dryads' domain. The Dryads govern the lands they've cultivated, and the arrival of a new demon lord would complicate matters for those across the river. Kaijin finds this development intriguing, noting that the demon lords have acknowledged Rimuru's authority over the forest's resources. This implies that anyone seeking to settle in the forest must obtain Rimuru's consent. Gabiru mentions the numerous inhabitants already residing in the forest, prompting Rimuru to realize they will soon seek his approval. Shuna predicts those who fail to pay respects to Rimuru may face consequences, as being under a demon lord's protection carries significant weight. Rigard adds that a demon lord symbolizes power, citing the lizard men's eagerness to align with Rimuru. Gabiru confirms his father's intent to visit Rimuru following his ascension, having informed Shin beforehand. Rimuru questions Shin's failure to inform him, anticipating other tribes to follow suit. Deciding to capitalize on the influx of visitors, Rimuru plans to showcase their town as part of a grand campaign. He stresses the need for additional labor and proposes using the opportunity to expand their population. Rimuru suggests introducing visitors to their town's amenities, hoping some may choose to migrate. He emphasizes the importance of relaxation, proposing a festival to lift spirits and announce his public debut. Excitement spreads among the group, with Rimuru proposing the festival as an opportunity for his public introduction. This brings an end to our episode 3. If you enjoyed it, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.